Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show. Outside the House of Commons where the Brexit endgame is being played out. 'Twas the night before Christmas and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. But in this house, it hasn't been quiet over the last few weeks, it's been chaos. With motions, counter-motions, coups, counter-coups, votes of confidence, tabled and then defeated. Votes of confidence not really tabled at all. Final settlement Brexit motions tabled and then withdrawn. It's been total chaos for weeks. Today, we'll be asking some of the key players across the parties, is the Brexit endgame going to end in stalemate? And asking them why things will look up from their point of view in 2019. But first over to Tasmina in the studio with your tweets, your emails and your messages.
Thank you, Alex. And another great response to our show last week from Copenhagen. Mick says, with all due respect to Denmark, in might and power and reach, she is no UK. Margaret says, interesting to see Brexit from a Danish view. Certainly don't think any country would wish to follow our example, lol. George says, as a Scotsman with Faroese ancestors, I'm proud to see the Faroes being examined as a working example of how we, he means Scotland, could go it alone. Kenny says, do you think all of Europe needs to have a look at the immigration policy? There seems to be a lot of disquiet all over Europe regarding immigration, leading to the rise of the far right. And finally, we hear from Craig, who says, people saying they're fed up with Brexit after 2 years. Some of us have been campaigning for independence for 10 times as long. Hashtag never give up. I quite agree, Craig. Now, last week, Alex compared Prime Minister Theresa May's approach to the Commons vote to the charge of the Light Brigade in the Crimean War. Cannons to the right of her, cannons to the left of her, and cannons in front. However, at least the Light Brigade made a charge. In contrast, the Prime Minister pulled stumps on her Brexit proposal even before the first whiff of grape shot. It was as if her cricketing avatar Geoffrey Boycott had decided to stay in the pavilion eating the sandwiches instead of facing the fast bowling. Then she survived an insurrection led by the double-barrelled Jacob Rees-Mogg. And after a quick sojourn to Brussels to be called nebulous by Jean-Claude Juncker, the Prime Minister was back to the Commons this week with her dead bat at the ready, rebuffing Jeremy Corbyn's attempts to have her Brexit proposals retabled and then finally given a decent burial. The Prime Minister wants to keep her deal on life support until the new year. It is the ghost of past Christmas.
We've now had 3 days of debate on the withdrawal agreement, setting out the terms of our departure from the EU and the political declaration setting out our future relationship after we have left. I've listened very carefully to what has been said in this chamber and out of it. To what has been said in this chamber and out of it by members from all sides. From listening to those views, it is clear that while there is broad support for many of the key aspects of the deal, on one issue, the Northern Ireland backstop, there remains widespread and deep concern. As a result, if we went ahead and held the vote tomorrow, the deal would be rejected by a significant margin. We will therefore defer the vote scheduled for tomorrow and not proceed to divide the House at this time.
So the Theresa May Brexit charge faltered in the face of the enemy political cannon. Alex talks to one of the MPs who was firing the biggest guns, Sammy Wilson of the DUP.
Sammy Wilson, this week the Labour leader has tabled a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister, not going to be taken this week but could be taken in the new year. Is that a motion that the Democratic Unionist Party could support?
No, it's not. And our main focus now is not on changing the Prime Minister, on changing the government, but on changing the government's policy. It's a misguided policy. It's a policy which doesn't marry up to its manifesto commitments, to the commitments it's made to the people in Northern Ireland. This is too important for us. And we believe that the important thing is to get this deal defeated, to keep as many people on board as possible. That means keeping Conservative supporters on board, and that's what we'll be doing.
But no weakening of the DUP opposition to the May proposal or anything that contains a backstop which opens up a differentiation between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK?
No, absolutely not. In fact, we believe that by engaging in these political games we'd be weakening our position, because we may annoy some people in the Conservative Party who are currently supporting us. So our main focus is getting this agreement stopped, and whatever it takes to do that, we'll do it. And we don't believe that supporting motions of no confidence in the Prime Minister is a route to that. The way to do that is to ensure that we keep as many people on board, people who have already made it publicly clear that they will oppose this agreement when it comes to the House of Commons, whenever that happens in early January.
How could the Prime Minister misread the signals from the Democratic Unionist Party so completely?
Well, I think that first of all, she's not very good at reading any political signs. Look at the disastrous general election she led her party into. She has ignored the warning signs within her own party, and she certainly was never, ever able to claim that we were ambiguous, or, to use the current term, nebulous in the information we gave to her from day one, and that was that we were going to leave and we would support a policy which made sure we left the European Union in respect of the wishes of the people of the United Kingdom, and secondly that Northern Ireland left at the same time and left under the same conditions. Why did she go in a different direction? Did she listen to her civil servants? Did she listen to those advisors around her who thought we were bluffing? They know now we're not bluffing.
So looking at the new year and how the Commons extracts itself from this impasse, your position is that the Theresa May deal is effectively dead. It can't get your support. Would I be right in saying that the main issue for the Democratic Unionist Party is not the hardness or softness of Brexit, but is that your Brexit is the same as the rest of the United Kingdom's Brexit?
Well, I think there are two issues there. First of all, yes, our Brexit has to be the same as the United Kingdom's Brexit. But secondly, the Prime Minister did make a commitment to the people of the United Kingdom that when we were leaving, we'd be taking control of our own borders, we'd be taking control of our money, we'd be breaking free from the European Customs Union and single market, and that's the kind of Brexit we want to see her delivering.
So are you saying if the Prime Minister was tempted to veer towards the Norway Plus or Norway Minus or some sort of near Norway type deal, then that wouldn't find favour with the DUP?
No, it wouldn't. I mean, it's been made perfectly clear that a Norway-style deal would still require what the EU say, special arrangements on the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Norway's deal was all about Norway eventually joining the EU as a full member. We want to leave the EU.
So it's kept out of it for the last 45 years.
That's a very, very significant point you're making, Alex, because it was meant to be a temporary arrangement, just as the backstop is meant to be a temporary arrangement. And I don't want in 45 years' time to be saying, oh, there was a temporary arrangement. It was never meant to be used, only an insurance policy, but it would be done away with eventually, and 45 years we're still stuck in it.
On the other hand, Norway is the second most prosperous country in the world by most measurement. They're not doing too badly in their temporary arrangement.
And they're not doing badly because of oil and because of other assets which they have, and the ability they've had to keep their fishing industry clear from...
Are you telling me a small country with oil was in a very good position?
A small country with oil is in a very good position, but a small country with oil linked to the fifth biggest country in the world is in even a better position.
Sammy Wilson, I'm putting you in the mode of Father Christmas. You're Santa Claus, and you've got a wish that you can grant to the beleaguered Prime Minister Theresa May. What would that wish be for the Prime Minister? Well,
my wish would be that she would find the kind of resolve that she is demonstrating against her own party members and apply it when she goes and talks to Barnier and co. If she could show that resilience and that resolve and that backbone, then I think she'd send those EU negotiators scurrying for their pen and paper to get a deal which is good for the United Kingdom and good for Europe.
Sammy Wilson.
Okay.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks very much.
Well, not much seasonal cheer for Theresa May or indeed the Labour Party from the DUP. Alex asked top Labour MP Chris Williamson to explain the opposition's strategy.
Chris Williamson, a lot of people have been quite surprised by the Labour leadership tactics this week, when tabling a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister, which doesn't have priority in parliamentary business, as opposed to tabling one in no confidence in the government, which would have. Can you explain what's going on in terms of Labour's thinking?
Well, it's the Prime Minister who's in the frame. I mean, she's the one who's been dragging her feet. And I think the feeling was that it was appropriate to table a motion of no confidence in her premiership. She's clearly not fit for purpose. She's somebody who has completely destroyed these negotiations, it seems to us, in relation to the European Union and Britain's relationship with the EU. And I think as far as putting a vote of no confidence in the government at this stage is concerned, I know some people have been arguing that we should do that. It's because they want to get on to this whole issue about a second referendum, and frankly I don't think that's a sensible way to proceed.
So are Labour in talks with the Democratic Unionist Party to see if there is a means of agreement by which a successful vote of no confidence could be laid?
Well, I've not been party to any conversations, but it was significant that one or two of the DUP spokespeople seemed to be talking in fairly complimentary terms, I think, about Jeremy Corbyn. And interestingly, some of the DUP commentators and supporters have been posting online to suggest that Jeremy Corbyn appears to be speaking more in sort of a unionist terms than the Conservative Party, and a sort of a challenge of the Conservative Party, the Conservative and Unionist Party. It's how on earth they managed to get themselves into this situation. So I do think it's a possibility. Clearly they've got no truck with this deal that Theresa May has negotiated, and I think in those circumstances, if indeed the deal is voted down, and we think there's a good chance that it will be, then we feel that there might be an opportunity of getting a vote of no confidence. Then we've got a fortnight. Parliament has a fortnight in which to see whether an alternative administration could be stitched together, and if that's not possible, then we get a general election. And I think, frankly, it's a general election what we need to end this impasse that we're stuck in at the moment.
But wouldn't a rapprochement between the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, and Jeremy Corbyn be a bit of a leap of faith?
Look, you know, in the end, politics are the art of the possible, and, you know, I think the DUP would potentially take a pragmatic view on it. I mean, look, who would have thought that Ian Paisley would have sat down with Sinn Féin, you know, and Martin McGuinness and sharing power? You know, you'd have just sort of said that would never have ever been possible. I remember Ian Paisley making his speech in Belfast when he was chanting, never, never, never would he surrender in that sense. So, yeah, I mean, look, politics is a moving feast, and particularly now, and I think anything is possible.
But how, after all the tumult of the last few months, have we seemed to have reached a position at the end of the year where the Brexit denouement seems to be a stalemate?
Well, I mean, I think this is what happens when you have a divided parliament and a minority government, and obviously a government which has been negotiating in a way which I don't think is in the national interest. I think they've been driven by their ideology. I mean, they're quite happy, many of them anyway, to have a deregulated tax haven, frankly, off the coast of mainland Europe. And I mean, I think what many Conservatives would like to see is Britain becoming the bargain basement economy of the European Union in an attempt to entice companies to locate here where it's easier to exploit workers. And I think, you know, from the European Union's perspective, I think they were too keen to have this bargain basement economy off the coast of Europe. I think if it was an arrangement that was negotiated, say, by a Labour government, then we'd be coming at it from a very different perspective. We'd be wanting to see the protections, the environmental rights, the workers' rights, the consumer protections, very much as a floor rather than a ceiling, which is where I think this particular government's coming from. So
let's look forward. 2019, what are going to be the moves that's going to break the parliamentary impasse and provide the breakthrough to get to a satisfactory endgame on Brexit?
Well, frankly, short of a general election, I'm not quite sure that there is any other way of breaking that impasse. Parliament is hopelessly divided. The Tories are riven. There are some differences of opinion, certainly on the Labour benches, and probably in every political party there are differences of opinion. And it's a very tricky state of affairs. I'm not in favour, frankly, of a second referendum, however. I think, you know, we gambled and we lost. I think calling for another referendum would undermine still further trust in the democratic process. It would increase cynicism, and more worrying than that, I think, is that it could unleash very dark forces in our country. We've seen the rise of the far right across mainland Europe. We're seeing it even in this country. I think a second referendum would be a gift to those extremists, and who knows where that could end. So my preference would certainly be to continue to press for a general election.
Now, I'm putting you in the persona of Father Christmas, and you've got a wish to grant Jeremy Corbyn, your party leader, for the new year? What's it going to be, Chris?
Oh, number 10. Keys to number 10 Downing Street, obviously, yeah.
Chris Williamson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Join us after the break, where we'll be talking to representatives of the two other crucial groups in the Commons, the Labour Brexiteers and the Scottish National Party. We'll see you then. Welcome back. The fate of Brexit is not just in the hands of the government, the opposition and the DUP. The small band of Labour Brexiteers have a potentially key role in the new year, as does the Scottish bloc of SNP MPs growing increasingly restive about the Westminster Brexit bourach. This is what was said in an SNP emergency debate on the issue this week.
But in Scotland, as new polls show, independence within the EU is preferable to Scotland being dragged out against its will. It's quite clear we need our own independence referendum and let the people of Scotland decide our future.
The Labour Party needs to lead. It is the biggest opposition party in this House. It needs to step up and coordinate the opposition, which is here on these benches and in those benches too, in order to defeat these proposals.
The government is running down the clock. But running down the clock is not governing. And it's certainly not governing in the national interest.
This deal will come back to the House in the new year, when we have had time to respond to the concerns expressed to date and hold those further discussions with the EU 27. There is broad support across the House for much of the deal.
Alex asks Kate Hoey, one of the most convinced of Labour's small band of Brexiteers, and Angus MacNeil of the SNP, to stare into their crystal ball to see whether Brexit and the shape of Christmas is yet to come.
Kate Hoey is a pro-Brexit Labour MP. Are you getting a bit worried that the party leadership might be softening towards a soft Brexit?
No, actually, I don't think so. I think I've got a lot of confidence in our leadership, because I think Jeremy's instincts are very clearly to get us out. He accepts the result of the referendum. He knows that he's got to keep his party together. He's played it quite carefully, balancing what is Labour Party policy, which of course is that if we don't get the general election, then all options are open, including a second referendum.
But it's generally thought that Labour membership are sympathetic towards Remain and a second referendum, but you're suggesting that Labour supporters, wider than membership, have a different view.
Yes, and I think the difference is too in London. You know, it's very easy when we're here in London, and very much Labour is kind of dominated by London, which it didn't used to be, to forget that outside there, and once you get into the Midlands and up into the north, there really are a lot of MPs. Remember, 70% of MPs where there was a leave vote out of London were Labour MPs, and they are very torn because they know their constituencies are not happy if there's a second referendum. They really don't want to go through all this. I think the public generally now, you know, we've had this saying about we just want to get on with it. I think genuinely people are fed up with it, and they can't understand also why we haven't left. They didn't understand the whole Article 50 process, and you know, they think two and a half years later, why are we still in the EU when we voted to leave?
Angus MacNeil is a very strong pro-independence SNP MP. Have you got any question marks that perhaps the SNP leadership seem keener on Europe than they are in promulgating Scottish independence?
Well, I think the SNP leadership have gone as far as they can in trying to convince the UK from preventing itself to committing the hara-kiri. I mean, the UK is determined to do itself economic damage. The SNP is manfully and womanfully done what it can to stop that. I think the SNP have gone far enough for that. We've got to leave them to their own devices. They will not listen to reason. The rest of the world's laughing at them, Europe's laughing at them, Scotland's laughing at them. We've got to move on and get ourselves on the lifeboat away from the economic carnage. And I think I've got a wee Twitter poll running, and it's about 90% to 10% of about 4,000 voters have said, and there'll be SNP members and supporters, of course, have said, let's get off the people's vote idea, pushing that referendum, and let's get on the second independence referendum, because that is what Scotland needs to do now, and this is a golden opportunity, of course, for Scotland.
I haven't voted in your Twitter poll yet, but...
there's an hour left.
Do you not think that the SNP's position, which has been to be in favour of the single market, in favour of the customs union, there might well be an opening for that in the new year? There might even be a parliamentary consensus towards some form of Norwegian option. Don't you think that's coming?
Well, I think if that sounds logical, that sounds sensible, but because it's logical and sensible, it's going absolutely nowhere with us in this Brexit debate. This Brexit debate has been governed by the opposite of logic and sense. I think what they should do is revoke Article 50, but they won't do that. We in Scotland, of course, voted against this. There was the good sense in Scotland. The people's vote's a lottery, it's a gamble. We should get on something that's certain for Scotland and good for Scotland, and that's independence.
Yeah, I mean, I think Angus is right about almost the nonsense of a second referendum, you know, so-called people's vote. You know, you forget that actually people did vote, but also, you know, this idea that somehow they automatically feel that everyone's going to change their mind and the referendum would be very different. I think it would be a very similar result with, if not Leave actually getting more, because I think there would be a very clear view that, you know, how dare you treat us as stupid, that we didn't know what we're doing, and this time we're really going to show you. So I think that's why there's not this great demand for a second referendum.
The Prime Minister says she was against having a general election.
Yes, she did, and she's changed her mind on a lot of things. And I mean, all that's done is made people just feel once again politicians don't stick to what they say.
Kate Hoey, can you explain Jeremy Corbyn's tactics this week of putting forward a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister, which didn't carry parliamentary precedence to be on the agenda, instead of a motion of no confidence in the government, which would have necessitated a debate this week? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I think Jeremy Corbyn realised that had no chance of getting through, and that it was going to be just a kind of, you know, we're showing our members out there that we're fighting the government. If we end up with no change to that deal and Northern Ireland really is being separated out, then that's when I think there would be a query of whether the DUP would feel it was worth supporting a no confidence.
I think Kate's right. A confidence vote is going nowhere at the moment. A people's vote's going nowhere at the moment. And my concern is the SNP are spending a lot of energy following that route, when the route for the SNP, the whole reason for being, is for Scottish independence. And that's the route we should be following, and this huge opportunity that this Brexit disaster is giving Scotland to become independent.
Final question to you both. Kate Hoey, we've ended the parliamentary year in effective stalemate. What's the way out of the impasse in 2019?
Just get out on March the 29th, even without a deal. Get a lot of money now being spent on planning to make sure that we can do that. Short-term difficulties, long-term gain.
And Angus MacNeil, what's your answer?
Well, I think economics is going to steamroller the politics of this in the end, and I think when the economic carnage starts to bite, the politicians will have to roll over, because that can lead to huge problems and social unrest. So I think Article 50 will be revoked. I don't think it'll be extended, I think it'll be revoked. Such is going to be the fear of what this no-deal Brexit will do. And remember, everybody's describing at the moment no deal as a catastrophe on all sides. And when they don't accept the deal, they're left with either a revocation or a catastrophe. And I think they will have to go, after describing the option, the alternative as a catastrophe, they will have to go for revocation.
And then I would say it will be Parliament versus the people, because we gave the decision to the people to leave, and for Parliament to try and overturn that will be absolutely an attack on genuine
After so much agreement, we're ending the year on note of discord. But Kate Hoey, your Father Christmas, you've got a wish that you can grant to Jeremy Corbyn. What is Santa Claus going to give your party leader?
The confidence to actually recognise and keep true to his genuine instincts. Every single lobby anti the EU for 30 years, he hasn't changed his views. He needs now to exert those views and actually get the Labour Party to be much more realistic about our future. Is best off out of the EU.
And Angus MacNeil, your Mother Christmas, what's Santa Claus going to wish for Nicola Sturgeon?
Well, I think Santa Claus will be wishing Nicola Sturgeon a referendum in 2019, a winning referendum in 2019, and also that her neighbours spare themselves economic carnage on our doorstep, in England, of course. And I think if we think back to 2014, had Scotland won its independence, then this chauvinist, anachronistic 19th century experiment of Brexit would never have happened, and the EU would be now an EU of 29 independent countries rather than a smaller EU of 27. And Jose Manuel Barroso should have thought ahead when he interfered in the Scottish referendum on the behest of David Cameron all those years ago.
Angus MacNeil, Kate Hoey, a Merry Christmas to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By all normal laws of politics, the Prime Minister should have packed her bags from Downing Street by now. Instead, she's wrapping her Christmas presents and hoping that the turn of the year brings a turn of her political fortunes. But merely hanging on and hoping for the best is hardly an answer to Britain's Brexit imbroglio. There is no majority in Parliament for the May deal or anything that resembles it. The Prime Minister capitulated on that last week. There is no more give from our exasperated erstwhile European allies. We also know there's no enthusiasm in the Commons for a hard Brexit or a no-deal Brexit. Equally, it seems unlikely that Norway Plus offers a safe haven anymore. And neither does the Parliament, for now anyway, have a majority prepared to say, let's just call the whole thing off. Most of these boats have already sailed, and the ones that haven't have big holes just below the waterline. The Prime Minister is no longer even the nominal captain of the parliamentary ship. She resembles more of a barnacle clinging desperately to the hull. Meanwhile, the Leader of the Opposition sounds a very uncertain note. The Tory Brexiteer flush is busted after their mistimed assault on their own leadership. Perhaps there's no longer any parliamentary captain at all, which would seem a certain way to run the ship aground. Even the Scottish contingent seems unsure as to when, or even whether, to launch their Caledonian lifeboat and chart their own course for the continent. In fact, the only parliamentary group who appear secure and determined in their own objectives are the Democratic Unionists. Make no mistake, the implications of a no-deal Brexit are far-reaching. Come April, car makers in the Midlands will wait in vain for their just-in-time parts. Beef producers in the northeast of Scotland will not savour a 40% tariff on the top end of their product. Financial services in London or Edinburgh will shift operations to those locations elsewhere which allow guaranteed access to their marketplaces. The idea that order can be extracted from chaos in less than the 100 days remaining for preparations is for the birds. However, and this is significant, the European Union seem rather better prepared for no-deal Brexit and have released their plans. How Downing Street must regret the last wasted 2 years of effectively zero contingency planning. Putting a gun to your own head and threatening to pull the trigger is hardly an effective negotiating tactic or a credible threat, either with our former European partners or indeed with recalcitrant members of Parliament. Since this is a Parliament which has reached impasse at the end of this year, it requires to make a resolution for the new year. If it cannot make a decision, then it needs to provide the means by which a successor Parliament can. Parliament should now take advantage of the Scottish ruling from the European Court of Justice, instruct the government to revoke Article 50. This would allow the time and space for either a general election or a renewed referendum or even just a rational discussion to break the deadlock and chart a way forward, free from the looming cliff edge. As we say in Scotland, that would make for a good new year. And so from Taz and me and all the team, it's a very Merry Christmas. Thanks for watching and goodbye for now.